There is a rare mental state that almost everyone has felt at least once in their life. A moment when the world disappears, time slows down, and your attention is completely locked onto a single thing. You don't get distracted. You don't feel any effort. You don't need to force it. Simply enter a deep focus. And when you come out of that state, you realize you produced more in 30 minutes than you normally would in hours. The problem is that for most people, this happens by chance. A specific day. A specific situation. An extreme deadline. And then it disappears. The focus becomes something unstable, unpredictable, out of control. And that's exactly what keeps so many people trapped in cycles of procrastination, constant distraction, and a sense of incapacity. But what almost nobody understands is that this state is not luck, nor talent, nor willpower. It is a specific mode of brain function. A mode that can be activated. And even more importantly, it can be repeated on command when you know exactly what to do. What prevents you from entering deep focus is not a lack of discipline. It's poorly managed excess stimulation. The modern brain lives in reactive mode, jumping from one trigger to another, trained to seek novelty instead of depth. And until this is corrected, trying to concentrate becomes a constant struggle against oneself. In this video, you will understand how to force your brain out of the scattered mode and into deep focus deliberately. Not with empty motivation. Not with ready-made phrases. But with specific adjustments in the environment, attention, and brain chemistry that create the right conditions for focus to happen. If you feel that you could produce much more if you could control your own attention, subscribe to the channel now. All the content here is focused on deep productivity, accessible neuroscience, and real mental control, without illusory shortcuts. Focus is not something you wait to appear. It's something you activate. And when you learn to do this, the relationship with study, work, and discipline changes completely. To understand why deep focus seems so difficult today, one must look at the standard state of the modern brain. Most people live in a fragmented mode. Attention is constantly pulled outward by small, quick, and unpredictable stimuli. Notifications, loose thoughts, open tabs, invisible interruptions. Even when nothing is happening, the brain is already conditioned to look for something new. This pattern creates a serious problem. The brain loses the ability to sustain continuous attention. It adapts to the short term, the immediate, the easy stimulus. And when you try to focus on something that requires depth, study, or complex reasoning, discomfort arises. Not because the task is difficult, but because the brain has been trained to avoid this state. Many people interpret this as a lack of discipline or laziness. But it's not. It's neurological conditioning. The brain learns to function the way you use it every day. If it spends most of its time reacting, it becomes excellent at reacting and terrible at sustaining focus. Deep focus does not arise when you try to force it. It arises when you remove the triggers that keep the brain in a state of scattered alertness. As long as these triggers are present, any attempt to concentrate turns into an internal battle. That's why copying extreme routines without understanding the mechanism behind them rarely works. Focus is not an isolated conscious decision. It is a physiological and mental state that needs to be prepared. Most people believe that focus is just a matter of willpower. That it is enough to decide to focus and eliminate external distractions. But this view ignores the most important point. Deep focus does not begin in the conscious mind. It starts in the body and in the way the brain interprets the surrounding environment. The brain is constantly responding to a silent question. Is this safe or unpredictable? When the environment is chaotic, full of random stimuli, the brain goes into surveillance mode. In this state, attention becomes superficial, scattered, and reactive. No matter how much you try to concentrate, the system is programmed to look for novelty and threats. Entering deep focus requires the opposite. It requires predictability. It requires a clear signal that nothing new will happen for a while. When the brain perceives this, it reduces the need to monitor the environment and frees up resources for deep thinking, complex reasoning, and intense learning. That's why some people can easily concentrate in certain contexts and not in others. It's not magic. It's an environmental signal. The brain associates that specific environment with depth and continuity. Forcing focus without adjusting these signals is like trying to sleep in a noisy and brightly lit place. You might even manage it out of exhaustion, but it's not sustainable. True focus is not tension. It's immersion. When you understand this, discipline takes on a new meaning. It's no longer about fighting against internal distractions. It's about creating external conditions that are so clear and repetitive that the brain focuses almost automatically. If up to this point this has already changed the way you perceive concentration, stay with me. In the next step, we will delve into the first practical technique to teach the brain to enter deep focus on command. The first practical technique to force the brain into deep focus on command does not involve mental effort. It involves ritual. The brain learns through repetition and association. Whenever the same set of signals is repeated before an activity, it begins to anticipate the state necessary to execute it. This means that deep focus doesn't start when you sit down to work. It starts minutes before. Most people ignore this phase and try to enter concentration directly from chaos. The result is internal resistance, restlessness, and constant distraction. What you need to create is a short and predictable ritual that precedes focus. Always the same time when possible. Always the same place. Always the same simple sequence of actions. It could be organizing the desk, putting on headphones, closing all irrelevant tabs, and starting a timer. What matters is not the ritual itself, but the consistent repetition. Over time, the brain begins to associate this set of signals with a state of deep focus. It reduces the need to monitor the environment and enters immersion mode more quickly. This is not motivation. It's neural conditioning. Another crucial point is the commitment with a limited duration. When the brain knows that the effort will have a clear beginning and end, it accepts going deep. Without a defined limit, it resists. A deep focus block needs to be long enough to engage but short enough not to generate anxiety. Generally between 30 and 90 minutes. This method seems too simple, and precisely because of that, it works. It shifts the focus from willpower to behavior design. In the next step, we will show how to use the brain's own chemistry to sustain this state without wear and tear. After the environment and ritual are adjusted, the next factor that sustains deep focus is brain chemistry. The most common mistake is trying to maintain concentration using only adrenaline, pressure, and urgency. This might work in the short term, but it comes at a high cost in terms of mental wear and performance decline. Real deep focus depends on a specific balance between dopamine and norepinephrine. Dopamine maintains interest and the feeling of progress. Norepinephrine maintains the state of alertness. When one of these substances is dysregulated, focus breaks. Either you get too agitated or too bored. A simple way to adjust this is to start the focus block with an extremely clear and small goal. Not working on everything. Work on a single specific thing. When the brain understands exactly what needs to be done, dopamine starts to rise steadily. This reduces the urge to seek parallel stimuli. Another important point is to eliminate immediate rewards during focus. Checking messages, changing music, opening social media. Each small reward breaks the chemical cycle and forces the brain to restart the state of deep attention. At the end of the block, the reward comes. A conscious pause. Get up, drink water, move. This teaches the brain that focus brings relief, not continuous suffering. Over time, it starts to accept entering this state with less resistance. If this content is helping you understand the focus in a different way, take the opportunity to like the video. This helps the channel grow and signals that this type of content makes sense to you. In the next step, we will talk about the biggest saboteur of deep focus and how to neutralize it. The biggest saboteur of deep focus is not the lack of discipline, nor the external environment. It's the mind trying to escape the initial discomfort of focus. Whenever you start a task that requires depth, the brain reacts with restlessness. Random thoughts arise. The urge to check something appears. Not because it is urgent, but because the brain has not yet entered the correct state. This initial moment is critical. Most people interpret this discomfort as a sign that something is wrong and give in. Changes tasks, gets distracted, interrupts the process. And every time this happens, the brain learns that fleeing is the best response. Deep focus requires crossing that threshold. The first few minutes are the hardest. After that, the resistance drops drastically. The brain adjusts and immersion begins. Those who master focus understand this and do not negotiate with the initial restlessness. He just remains. A simple technique to neutralize this saboteur is to reduce choice. No decisions during the focus block. No choosing music, tools, or next steps. Everything is already defined before starting. This reduces mental load and prevents the mind from seeking exits. Another powerful strategy is to accept discomfort as part of the process. Don't try to eliminate it, but go through it. Deep focus does not start comfortably. It becomes comfortable later. When you learn to stay in those first few minutes, something changes. Focus ceases to be fragile and becomes a reliable state. There are silent errors that keep people trapped in cycles of constant distraction, even when they believe they are trying to concentrate. One of the biggest is confusing busyness with focus. Being busy, responding to messages, switching tasks, and resolving small pending issues gives a sense of productivity, but it trains the brain for superficiality. He learns to never stay long enough on a single thing. Another common mistake is believing that deep focus requires constant motivation. This creates a dangerous dependency. When motivation wanes, focus disappears along with it. People who master concentration do not wait for willpower. They create systems that work even on bad days. There is also the myth that multitasking is efficiency. The brain does not switch tasks without cost. Each switch generates a loss of mental energy and fragments attention. The result is quick fatigue and low performance, even after long hours of work. Ignoring physiological limits is another saboteur. Sleeping poorly, eating poorly, and living in a constant state of stress prevent the brain from sustaining deep focus. It's not weakness. It's biology. Focus requires a minimally regulated nervous system. If any of these mistakes seem familiar to you, go ahead and like the video now. This helps this content reach more people who are also trying to focus but still don't understand why they fail. In the next step, we will show why this method works in practice and how it is used in high-demand mental contexts. When you observe people who can consistently enter deep focus, you realize that this is neither a rare talent nor special genetics. This pattern appears in environments where cognitive demand is high and distraction has a real cost. Programmers working on complex systems, researchers analyzing sensitive data, students in intense preparation. In all these contexts, focus is not an option. It is a tool for intellectual survival. Science explains why this method works. When the brain enters deep focus, there is a drastic reduction in competing stimuli and an increase in communication between areas responsible for reasoning, memory, and decision-making. This creates a state of mental efficiency far superior to the fragmented mode of everyday life. The most interesting thing is that this state does not depend on continuous effort. It depends on the correct input. Once activated, the focus sustains itself for a period. That's why people in deep focus report a feeling of flow. The work progresses with less friction. Time passes differently. This pattern also explains why trying to work with constant distractions is so exhausting. It's not the task that wears you out. It's the constant switching of context. Deep focus eliminates this invisible cost. If you are starting to realize that focus is more about systems than willpower, comment down below. I want to know if you have ever had an experience of intense focus or if it still seems like something distant. Bringing deep focus into daily life does not require an extreme routine or total isolation from the world. It requires clarity and repetition. The first step is to decide when deep focus will happen. Don't leave it for later. A set schedule transforms focus into commitment, not an option. Next, you narrow the scope. Deep focus is not doing everything. It's doing one important thing at a time. Before you start, you define exactly what the task is and what the criteria for completion are. This eliminates ambiguity and reduces the anxiety that usually breaks concentration. During the focus block, everything that is not related to that task ceases to exist. No switching tabs, no checking messages, no adjusting irrelevant details. If a thought arises, you don't follow it. Just return to the task. This repeated return is the real training of attention. At the end of the block, you consciously conclude. Don't stretch it out, don't force it. The brain needs to learn that deep focus has a beginning, middle, and end. This creates internal confidence. Over time, getting into focus stops being a struggle and becomes something familiar. Most people never experience this level of control because they try to improvise every day. Those who learn to focus on command build an accumulative advantage. Each session reinforces the next. In the end, deep focus is not about working more hours or pushing yourself to exhaustion. It's about control. Control of attention, the environment, and one's own internal reactions. When you understand how the brain enters this state, focus ceases to be something unstable and becomes a trainable skill. Most people spend their lives reacting to whatever comes their way. Notifications, urgent tasks, random stimuli. Those who learn to focus on command reverse this logic. Decides when to focus, for how long, and in what direction. This creates a silent but powerful advantage. While many feel busy, few actually make progress. Discipline, in this context, is not rigidity. It's clarity. It's about removing unnecessary choices and creating conditions that facilitate the right mental state. When deep focus becomes part of the routine, studying, working, and creating stop being a constant struggle against distractions. If this content has helped you see focus and discipline in a different way, subscribe to the channel now. Here, the goal is to teach how to use accessible neuroscience and deep productivity to gain real control over your own mind, without empty promises. Remember this. You don't have an attention problem. You were trained for distraction. And everything that has been trained can be reprogrammed. When you learn to enter deep focus on command, the external world stops pulling you all the time. And for the first time, your attention starts working in your favor, not against you.